You've tuned in to the #Lita podcast, where love is the answer. Before we get started today, I wanted to tell you just a little bit about my podcasting experience and encourage you to start one for yourself if you've been thinking about it. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. Yes, free. Second, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Third, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. You don't have to do a thing, and it can be heard on many different podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google. Finally, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Super easy. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm, ANCHOR.FM.
You are listening to the #Lita podcast, hosted by author, speaker, and coach Jeff Connor. He invites you each week as he has conversations to discover how others are using love to change the world. Listen in and find what inspires love within you, so you can go out and share it with the world. Remember, love is the answer.
I have a dream today.
Hello, and welcome to another great week on the #Lita podcast. My name is Jeff Connor, and I am your host for this hour plus that we have together to talk about things that people are doing that show and demonstrate how love is the answer to solve all of our greatest problems and answer most of our biggest questions. Before we get started, I just want to again thank you, the audience, because this show doesn't happen without you. Please help me grow this movement. Let's get involved and spread this idea that love is the answer. You can do that by going to the website, the Lita website, www.litaforlife.com. Also search up on Facebook, check out the show notes, and you'll find links for the Facebook page and the Facebook group, and let's just keep the conversation going. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, what you agree with, don't agree with, and let's have amazing conversations that at the end make us all better, help us understand one another better, and help us just grow in this idea that if we approach everything with love, we can transform the world around us. Also, please leave a review and any comments that you have on whichever platform you're using to listen to this. It's going to help grow the audience. It's another great way to help spread this movement and get the word out there that love is the answer. Okay, so will you do all of that stuff for me? Will you go ahead and like the Facebook page and start reviewing this show and start sharing it and just getting the word out there? If you will promise me you'll do that, I promise I'm going to dive right into this show and introduce our guest this week. This week on the #Lita podcast, I've got Teresa Thomas, and we're going to talk about how we can stop being so serious and connect with our inner joy. Teresa connects people, possibilities, and purpose as an award-winning professional speaker, networking expert, facilitator, and author of 2 books, Win-Win Networking and 50 Fun Things, Enjoy the Small Things. This week, Teresa and I have a very wide-ranging conversation talking about her latest book, The 50 Fun Things. We're going to cover topics from her book like giving, gratitude, self-love, being silly and playful to help us reduce stress, and the dangers of trying to please everyone. Teresa is also a master connector, and her book, Win-Win Networking, I made a mandatory reading for my entire sales team. I read it, and it helped us all get better at the catering company with networking and increasing our sales. She also has brilliantly tied what she does to the #Lita movement by saying, we are all connected. When everything else is stripped away, it's how we treat each other that matters. So if you, like most of us, find yourself taking things too seriously and are filled with anxious feelings, our conversation and the highlights from her book can help you stop that cycle and connect to what truly matters, creating a life of joy. Teresa is also the recipient of the 2019 Women in Business Champion through the Small Business Association of Minnesota. Teresa is also named as one of the 2019 50 Over 50 Leaders by AARP and Pollen. So without any further delay, Thank you for hanging in there with me. Let's go ahead and dive in and enjoy this conversation between Teresa and myself. Teresa, welcome to the #LEADA podcast.
Hey, Jeff and everyone. I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, and I'm super happy as well that we're finally able to set this up. I think you and I have known each other for about 7 years through our, at the time, our business coach, Barbara Zuleger. We met in some of her workshops, if I remember correctly.
That you are correct. Yeah, we would see each other about, once a quarter at those quarterly planning days. And it was a great way to get to know you and also to see the journey you've been on, and both of us have been evolving alongside with our businesses.
Yeah, it's been pretty fun to watch. Let's start there if we can, back in 2013, what was going on for you? And then maybe just take us through, because ultimately what the audience, what we want to know is what's love got to do with Teresa Thomas and your work. So kind of take us through from 2013 to today, what you've been doing and what led you to be on this #LEADA podcast with me.
Sure thing. So 2013, if I look back, okay, so that's 7 years ago, and I was 1 year past divorce in 2013. And so things were already starting to shift and change. And Jeff, you saw, because we were in those quarterly planning days together, we really shared a lot about our struggles, our highlights, what was working, what wasn't. And I was, at that time, I was primarily focused on serving women entrepreneurs, which I still do. And I was really trying to be everything to everyone. I didn't want anyone to be disappointed. I wanted to offer as much as I could. I was offering sometimes 3 to 4 events a month. And I was kind of running myself a little ragged, trying to do it all. And fast forward from there to 3 years ago, I was starting to face burnout. And it was because I was trying to be everything to everyone and was realizing that I was kind of getting off my own path in doing that, and realizing that I wasn't role modeling what I want to infuse in the people that I serve, to pursue the lives they want, to feel joy, to feel connection. And so I was approaching my 50th birthday. I was, at anyone who's approaching a milestone birthday like that, or a midlife crisis, I suppose, takes a chance to think about, am I living the life that I really want to be living? And at that time, I thought, okay, I'm turning 50. People are going to expect me to have a birthday party. And I love running workshops, and I used to play school when I was a kid. So I thought, well, what would make a birthday party fun for me? And I came up with this idea that I would make a chart of 50 fun things that I wanted to experience in the coming year. And I would ask people to fill it out, and I'd just see how it goes. And I was so surprised that everyone at my party filled out the chart, and they even filled out big things or quirky things, out there things that I didn't really expect them to do. And my life immediately shifted to be more in alignment, to be excited and hopeful again, to have areas of my life become connected. People from different areas of my life wanted to do things together, and it was fun for me to introduce them. It got me trying new things. It got me out of my comfort zone. It got me appreciating the small little joys in my life, as well as you would call them reach goals, things that I'd always wanted to do, but maybe been hesitant. And so I thought that was just for me. But people were following the journey and asked me to share it, to write about it, to blog, to write a book, to create a workshop. So because I'm a workshop-y type of person, I thought, ooh, that's where I want to start. So I offered a workshop. It went well. All of a sudden, I was offering it at least once a month to different groups. I got asked to facilitate 50 fun things at a retreat in Italy. I've done that 3 times, and I have another one coming up. The world literally started opening up, and I realized it wasn't just about me anymore. And since that time, it's evolved where now it's serving teams in corporations. It's about corporate wellness, whole life well-being. It's about employee engagement. It's about how we connect with each other, which ultimately fits with what I'm all about. And that is when you strip away everything else, as like 2020 is doing to us. For me, the way I see the world is when you strip away everything else, it's really how we treat each other that matters. And it's about how we love ourselves, how we love each other. And that pivotal point for me was realizing that, yes, I was giving love out, but I needed to bring love in, like that self-love, that self-care to prevent burnout so that I could be all that I wanted to be for other people really required me to take care of myself too. So that's how I see a really great connection with love is the answer. Because again, when you strip down everything, that's how we treat each other. And if we treat each other with love and care and connection and joy, things go so much better.
Yes, they do. Say, it struck me as you were talking a little bit about this, Teresa, that you had life before you and I met in 2013. I know it's hard to believe, but you did. What I don't know if I don't really even know what your history was prior to. How long had you been working with Barbara at that point? What did you do professionally before you got into the women in networking and starting down that path with Barbara? Kind of, I guess, just give me the Cliff Notes version of what your life had been like leading up to that point. And I'm most curious, I think, two things that you said really stood out to me. And if you can tie them into this kind of history of yourself, it's one, you mentioned twice trying to please everyone else and how that took you out of who you really were. And then I think right along with that is you talked about bringing love in and creating that self-love. And how does all of that, I guess, your history, how did that move you to those revelations?
Sure. You might have to remind me of some of the questions. So I'll start with the history, and then I'll connect it to those revelations. So let's see, it's hard to keep track of the years now, but I know for over 25 years in my professional career, I have been a connector in some shape or form. So it started out where I was working for a social justice program, and I was connecting students to community members, activists, artists, people that were working on the city and citizenship and that type of thing. I was not only connecting them to field experience experts, but also to internship experiences that would help them to learn even more about what they're studying for urban studies or for being community artists. And so I loved doing that connection. It helped me to see that what really makes me tick is getting people to think about how they really want their lives to be and then finding the tools to get them there. So that's how it started.
Were you on your own during this, or were you working with someone or for someone else?
Oh, yeah, I was working for a consortium of, I think it was 18 colleges at the time for a program. So I got to connect with students in higher education, with faculty at all these different campuses, with the internship sites, the community organizations, the artists and people in the community. So it was, I love that. My brain works as if I'm making a puzzle where I see people and I can see if they would be a fit. I don't know how I do it. It's intuitive, and it also is based on logic too. Like if I know these elements about people, there's something about how my brain works that I'm able to see possibilities that sometimes other people can't. And like, oh, if you came together, this is where you'd have synergy, and this is how you could be helpful. And so that's how that really got started. And then when I was at the university, when I was doing my senior project, I was an art student, and all the other students that I knew, they were doing a show to showcase what their artwork, was. And for me, I was a generalist. I wanted to try all the different art classes. And I was less interested in being a great artist and more interested in how people communicate and express themselves and connect through art. And so at the time, we look back at our lives and realize that even as a student, I knew way more about how I tick than I realized, and a little bit feeling shameful because I wasn't this, expert artist. I went to my advisor and I said, Cindy, I really don't think I want to have an art show. What would really light me up would be to do a community arts celebration and have professors talk about why they do their artwork, how they got started to demonstrate their work. I'd like to have the graduate students talk about their journey and show what they do and connect with the undergrads. I would like to invite art organizations in to talk about their internship and volunteer opportunities. I'd like to have activities that help to create a sense of community with the students and the faculty. And she loved the idea, and we did it. And I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I do now. That's exactly what I do. I look for where there can be really wonderful, uplifting connections all around where everyone benefits from coming together. And I love that creative piece of making it happen. So, and then since that time, I've also helped connect students on national student exchange programs. And then I've had a different networking organization that I used to run for wellness professionals. And yeah, so that's what I'm about. I'm about connecting people so they can identify their goals and how they can help each other out in fun ways.
Yeah, thanks for going through that history. I think it gives us just a little bit better kind of understanding of what's led you here today. Just to dive in a little bit more into this, trying to please everyone, and I find that closely related to your statement about bringing love in and self-love. How do you see those two kind of ideas relating to one another? Or I guess, how does trying to please everyone really impact your ability to love yourself?
Well, there's a lot I could say about that. And I think I'll start out by saying something that a member of Women in Networking pointed out to me years ago that really stuck with me. And she said, you know what, Teresa, you're always focused on how you can help other people out, but it doesn't feel very fair because we want to help you out too. And we would like for you to tell us what you need. That's part of a reciprocal relationship. She didn't say quite those same words, but that's how I've remembered it and processed it. And I'm still learning that, but it's been a huge lesson. And I think about it, and it's true. When I'm connecting with somebody, if that person gives and gives and gives to me and doesn't let me know how I can be helpful or how I can return the favor or be a resource for them, it does feel off, and it does feel, people want to have a relationship that goes back and forth and they're helping each other out. So I think what happens is a lot of people, I don't want to generalize women, I think, all of us, many of us, we focus so much on wanting to be liked, wanting to be accepted. Maybe we were bullied as kids. Maybe it's our upbringing. Whatever it is, there's something wired in us that we need to keep everybody else happy. But what happens is when we keep trying to pour from our cup and pour from our cup and pour from our cup, there's hardly anything left.
Yeah.
So an analogy that really helped me was when I used to facilitate events, I loved it. I really felt in my element. And then I would come home and I'd start getting a migraine and I would be so tired I could hardly move. And I thought about it and I thought, oh, it's because I feel like I'm pouring out good energy. But what I realized was, instead of seeing myself as a pitcher of water, that I should start seeing myself more as if like the sun or a light, something that does not diminish when it shares. And so I started thinking in terms of, okay, so if I share my light and I allow other people's light to come in, I can accept their light back. So even though it's just a simple analogy, for me, it helped me to shift my mindset about energy, what I give out, what I bring in. I started getting more selective about the types of things that I would participate in. And actually, when I developed 50 Fun Things, one of the things I asked participants to do is come up with their guiding principle. And for me, at that time, my guiding principle was that, how did I word it? It was that I would surround myself with people and experiences that gave as much energy back as I gave out. And that, having that shift for that year really helped me to get more in alignment so that I wasn't feeling so depleted. So.
Yeah. And I think, a couple of things come to mind when you talk about opening yourself up and what that woman said that they want to give to you as well. I think about how many times in my life I've literally had the things that I need show up for me through someone else. They've offered it to me and I've turned it down.
Wow.
Out of
Yeah.
pride, I guess, out of this feeling that I can't take, I can only give. We've been taught. I interviewed the authors of one of my favorite books not too long ago, Bob Berg, who is co-author of The Go-Giver, and in that they've got these 5 laws of stratospheric success, and one of those, the 5th law, is called the law of receptivity, and it says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. And when you think about it, it's natural, the giving and receiving. We just look at the world, plant life everywhere on this globe is taking in oxygen and giving out taking in carbon dioxide and giving out oxygen, right? And we do just the opposite. We take in their oxygen and breathe out their carbon dioxide. So our giving is their receiving, and their receiving is their giving. And that's just natural. And so many times in our lives, especially when things are going wrong, if we look, we could probably trace out the number of times that we've turned down the very help that we need to make things right.
I hear you. And that's beautiful how you shared about the oxygen and carbon dioxide and how in nature that's even happening. And it also makes me think about how it feels when I've wanted to be helpful to somebody and they've come back like, oh no, I'm fine. It doesn't feel good. Like, I wouldn't say it feels horrible, but it just like, oh shoot, I thought they would like this. Or
That's that's a really good point that you bring up there, and I think in the Go-Giver, if I'm not mistaken, they even say, what right do you have to cut off somebody's ability or the giving of somebody else? Don't stop that. I think after I read that, I actually can remember going to Aldi, and for anyone who shops at Aldi, you got to put a quarter to get a grocery cart. And then you get your quarter back when you bring the grocery cart back and put it back in the line with all the other carts. And I'll never remember a woman handing me a cart, and I wanted to give her back a quarter, and she said no. And it was almost like we were both trying to cut off each other's giving in that moment. But it really drove home for me that need. And after my son's death last November, that's one of the things I really chose to lean into, because at that time, there were lots of people who were wanting to help me. And lots of us just have this mentality that we need to lift ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We need to take care of our own business and not rely on other people. For whatever reason, we get that mentality about ourselves. And going after the funeral, before, during, and after, and even now, so many people are offering. And I just really made this commitment that I was going to accept every bit of generosity from anyone, no matter how big, how small. I just was going to lean into the generosity of others. And frankly, I think that's had a huge impact and has fundamentally changed my life in so many ways, and made me even more generous in the prospect of accepting others' generosity. I think sometimes maybe one of the reasons why we have a hard time accepting others' generosity, and I look back at my own life and when I wasn't open to accepting the giving of someone else, it was probably because I was being at my most selfish. I
Mm.
wasn't being generous myself. Isn't it funny how life can sometimes be a mirror
Oh,
back?
that is interesting. Yeah, and for me, well, one, that's beautiful that you're opening yourself up to, that you're leaning into receiving. And I can imagine that by you receiving that it's, well, one, healing, and also I bet it's deepening your connections and your relationships because you're accepting those offers and yeah, and deepening that sense of connection. So I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah, thanks.
Um,
And you're right, it's definitely the relationships and the connections to other people has taken on a whole new dynamic in so many different ways with so many different people as you just open up um, to other people's generosity. It's an amazing shift, I think, in mindset. And you even talk about that because I want to get into that too, and the 50 fun things. Go through a little bit of that, but I remember having read through it, and I don't remember exactly where, but I know that you talked about just being grateful and showing gratitude, and I think it was something specific around accepting a compliment from someone.
oh, you know what? I do. I have accept compliments in there. And then I think I want to say that I also have accept help. I'm just quickly looking through the table of contents, but I believe that also accept help was one of the 50 that made it to the cut. Yeah, and as far as accepting help, something else that somebody told me that has been really helpful in me being better at it is they said, Teresa, when somebody offers help, they've already thought about if they really want to do it. It's like,
Uh-huh.
so
Well, wait a
you don't
second
have
now.
to
I
feel
want to challenge that. How about
okay.
how about at Thanksgiving when I look at my wife and ask her, do you want help with the dishes? Because
Oh, and you don't really mean it?
yeah, I'm really hoping she says no so I can keep watching football. Not really, but I mean,
Yeah.
we do
I mean,
that.
there are times where people make empty offers, but there's nothing wrong with like, accepting that help. Hey, you offered, I will take you up on that. But I'm thinking like if somebody, yeah, so the instances that this person was referring to was if people said, oh, can I, help you out at this event, or can I, they'd come up with like some specific way. And my immediate reaction was like, oh, I feel guilty. I don't want to use your time, or, oh, that's so generous. I don't know if I could do that. And that this person was pointing out to me that if somebody's volunteering to help you out or do something, you can accept it. And like you said, and every now and then there's somebody that doesn't really mean it. Well, hey, you just learned a lesson. Don't offer empty help. That
Yeah,
if somebody accepts it, then I don't know. I think it'll be good all
yeah.
around. And if your wife says, yes, Jeff, come help me with the dishes, then I would expect that you would probably step up and help her out and see the positive part of it, and maybe regret a little bit that you're not, watching the game. But
Yeah, probably. I'd probably get over my
I think
and the
so.
TV is accessible. I can watch TV while doing the dishes, so that's a good thing about our house. I do want to point out, yes, you're right. Number 9 in the 50 fun things is accept compliments, and number 31 is accept help.
Oh,
So
yes.
they are both in
Okay.
there.
Thank you for looking up that.
You bet. So let's dive into a few of the other 50 fun things. I guess, first of all, before we do, have you told enough about, do you feel like we've got enough of the backstory on why you started, giving us the story behind the evolution of the 50 fun things?
Yeah, I think so. And one thing I will say is that the little book that we're referring to now, 50 Fun Things and Small Things, that evolved out of the workshops. So in the workshops that I've done, those are very much directed for people to find their own 50 fun things that are specific for them, their personalities, their stage of life, whatever their next steps or transitions are in life. So those are very, very open and interactive and connect people through that. And then the book itself is, I was getting encouraged to share, well, what are some of the 50 things that you consistently turn to? The 50 little things that are easy and accessible to just quickly do.
And I think you
And,
cut out for just a second when you
oh,
were
did I?
saying the title.
Oh,
So I want to reiterate. It's 50 fun things. Enjoy the small things. I think the word enjoy got cut off somehow in the
oh,
transmission here. So I just wanted to point that out. But one of the things I do want to, when you sent me a little note about some of this, the 50 fun things, and I want to dig into this statement that you made. You said meaningful connection through joy, clarity through joy. And then this is what I really want to dive into. You said joy is a resiliency tool.
it's
What do you
all of
mean
those
by
things.
that? What specifically the resiliency tool? Because I think that's fascinating. Joy being a resiliency tool. How do you see that?
Well, I've learned it personally, and I've also been learning it through research that I've been doing ever since I realized that focusing on small joys lifted me out of a sense of overwhelm and anxiety and probably depression. So if you think about it, our society is really geared to pursue happiness. And what is happiness? Happiness is elusive. Happiness is a fleeting state, and we somehow feel deficient if we're not feeling happy. And sometimes things just really are rotten. And 2020 is showing us that things can be challenging beyond belief. And I would say that a lot of people would say that they haven't felt a lot of happiness maybe in 2020. But joy is a sense of being that can be really simple. So imagine you're feeling really, really down about something, and you tell yourself, can I find one thing today that feels joyful? You usually can. You can usually find something beautiful in nature. You can think about someone who's meant a lot to you in your life. You can find joy in self-care. Maybe you just need to take a long bath or let yourself sleep in. Joy is more accessible. It's a feeling that is not ear to ear grinning party, roller coaster. Joy is just about living and appreciating what you have and having that gratitude and taking those moments, even if they're small, to remember that there are things that can light you up and keep you going, to remember or to look forward to.
Yeah, I think when I hear that statement, joy is a resiliency tool, it really reminds me of my life here, especially in the last 9 months since last November when our son died. And I tell people this all the time, is that even through that tragic event, and there are days when no doubt, there are moment by moment times when no doubt I'm in the full throes of grief, when I'm grieving over the loss of my son, when I'm grieving for the extreme sadness and the impact it's had on my wife. But I can have that grief, and underneath of it, there's still this base of joy. And the joy that I cultivated and had been cultivating prior to Waylon's passing stuck with me even after his passing. And it's helped me be resilient in the face of one of the I don't know. I've heard that there's no greater tragedy, no greater sorrow, nothing worse that a human being can go through than the loss of their own child. And yet I've experienced that and still can find joy every single day of my life.
Yeah. Those moments where Yeah, I got chills when you were sharing that in your story, because I'm just imagining that there were probably times where you were deep in grief, but you remembered something silly about Waylon. Maybe somebody shared a story, um, and you realize that all's not lost, and it does. It's those little things that are what keep us going.
Yeah. Number 5 of the 50 fun things, I wanted to touch on that because I think I had just recently read a different book. And some of this it's interesting, how things just kind of play together and things show up in your life as you're ready to hear them. But number 5 is the childlike wonder.
Mm.
And in that you talk about, we get caught up in rushing through our day-to-day activities and don't notice things that are quite amazing unless we pause to notice. And it really made me think about when there are times, like I can see it in my wife when she is overcome by the throes of grief, the loss that she's felt at having lost her son. She's kind of caught up in that moment. And there are times, I'm curious if you have this. I've noticed here over the last couple of weeks, I've really gotten into touch with the times when I'm feeling a lot of anxiety and a lot of pressure to get things done, check things off my list, move on to the next thing. And I feel like I'm almost in this whirlwind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff going on around me. And the more I stay in that, the more it seems to swirl and get worse, I guess is the best way to say it. We get so caught up in those whirlwinds of the thoughts and sensations. What I've noticed is that when I can stop and pause and just observe life from almost a bystander or an observing viewpoint, that a lot of that stuff just seems to diminish and go away.
It does. You brought up a really good point, actually, one that that I've been going through in the past week, where we get caught up in our routines and our habits and our must do this, cross this off the list. And sometimes we just get into this expectation, like, well, that's how it always is. And I paused and I started digging into that and looking at my list and what really mattered. And some of it, if I stripped it away, would actually make everything else better. I'm like, never even thought about, like, oh, I don't have to be every single place on social media, for example, is one of them. And I'm making a decision to start shedding some of that was like, oh my gosh, I never thought about the fact that I don't have to be on Twitter and all these different. So that's just an example of kind of stepping back and realizing, does this all matter? Does this all matter right now? And if it all does matter right now, how can you find ways to make it more enjoyable? So if, say, you have to make a bunch of calls, well, infuse it with love. Like, okay, I have to make some calls that I'm not excited about, but I'm going to make those calls the best they can be. I'm going to really connect with this person. I don't need to spend a lot of time on the phone with them, but I'm just, I'm going to be a day brightener. And having that shift can make a big difference.
Yeah, when you talk about making shift and perception, a lot of it has to do, don't you think, with the story that we tell ourselves about things. Like you were just talking about how 2020, a lot of people are struggling with 2020, and there could be, sadness and not being happy around it, and we could get bogged down in that. But what's interesting, like as you were saying that, I was thinking to myself that actually 2020 is probably shaping up to be one of the best years of my life. So,
and you're right. It's perspective.
Yeah.
You're so right, because immediately when you said that, I realized, oh my gosh, there's been so many positive, bright sides of 2020 that are easy to overlook. Like, people are realizing how important human connection is, and are being more, a lot of people are being more mindful about their connections, and the ones especially that they realize really matter to them, or the simple things like, I have been cooking and baking and loving it, and I forgot how much I like baking, and it's simple, but I wouldn't have rediscovered that if I hadn't been forced to pause and find, new different things to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's when I think of the 50 fun things, enjoy the small things, what it really is saying to me is that they're really, you stopped at 50 because you got to stop somewhere. But when you really think about it, there's infinite possibilities
Mm-hmm.
for us to find fun things. And so often, like I was describing a few minutes ago about being caught up in this whirlwind of events and circumstances, and our judgments on those events and circumstances and other people and all that we've got to do, we're too serious sometimes, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, we get way, way too serious about our lives, and forgetting, lives are for living, right? I mean, that's the old adage. And I thought of a quick little story that I have on my blog too, that is about a big mind shift for me and how I used 50 fun things. Is it okay if I share?
Absolutely, please.
Okay, so yeah, I mentioned that I've been really grateful to have been invited to these retreats in Tuscany to facilitate 50 fun things. And the very first time I went over, I was nervous because I hadn't traveled, in a big way for a long time. And I was sleep deprived, and I brought the wrong size luggage, so I had to sit like a frog the entire flight over the ocean. And I was uncomfortable. I was tired. The cabbie ripped me off. I realized I forgot almost all of my euros except for 100 euros at home. And he took almost all of them. And then I thought I should take a walk, and I got lost. And I was kind of in a pissy mood, It's just like, this is not what I was expecting. And this is not, blah, blah, blah. And so I paused, and I thought, I wonder if this 50 fun things can help me with this. So I thought, can you possibly, so this is what I did the next morning. I woke up and I was like, can you possibly think of 50 fun things that have happened since you arrived? I'm like, no, nothing good has happened. And so like, just try it. It doesn't have to be 50, but just see if you can get there. So I took myself on a walk, and it was things that you wouldn't have to be in Italy to do this. I realized like, oh, that's really beautiful architecture on that building. Or, ooh, this is inspiring how this house has their gate and their flowers. And, oh, I've never seen a dog like that before. How cute. Or, wow, the texture of that plant is really interesting. I wonder if it's prickly or if it's soft. Or, oh, the breeze today is really interesting. And I got up really early, and I watched the sunrise. I went for a walk. I noticed how things felt and looked and sounded. And I almost couldn't write fast enough to keep up with these little simple things that I normally take for granted. And so that relates to that childlike wonder that you were talking about in the book. And just opening yourself up when things just feel like, ugh, rotten. Put yourself in the perspective of a small child and finding the things that are delightful. And yeah, you might not find 50 of them, but just see how many you can find. And maybe it's, noticing your favorite color or whatever it is. Those little things really shift. And then ultimately what I did was realize I have nothing to complain about. Money can be replenished. I will figure it out. I've got a credit card. I learned my lesson quickly about getting ripped off. I didn't get lost. I was safe. And, focusing on the things that were working out helped me to shift so that I was in a great mood when that retreat started. And I think it was contagious because there were some other people they were grumpy, when they got off the plane about something. And I didn't even have to, talk to them about it, but joy is contagious. When somebody is excited about something and happy to be somewhere and happy to meet you, it rubs off on you.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking about coming up with that list of 50 fun things to help you shift your perspective, it reminds me of the technique that I use, called the 3 gifts technique. And I learned that in a book called Positive Intelligence. But in that, the whole premise of the technique is that you take a bad situation, like, all that happened to you, you can judge these circumstances as really bad. And typically that's what you were doing initially, right? You were
Right.
stuck in this kind of mindset. But what you did, and you took it beyond 3, but what I do is whenever I face some kind of a circumstance that can make me feel negatively or bring me down, I will sit down and write down what are 3 gifts that can come from this. And I think either way, whether you sit down and write 50 fun things that you've experienced, or what are 50 fun things that can come from it, or 3, gifts, or however you want to frame that, just frame it positively. But it's amazing how just taking your focus off of the negative aspect and taking that moment to step back and see and shift from a negative focus to a positive focus has an amazing impact on your state of being.
It
And you
really
talked
does.
about you found joy. And then, that's another thing I learned a long time ago. We've got basically 2 states that we're going to show up in at any given time. And if you hadn't done that exercise, you may have showed up to do your workshop in a negative state. And we all know people who are in negative states, right? And they're kind
Mhm.
of the people that when they walk in the room, we turn around and hope they don't notice us. And I was that as a manager, a leader of my company for a long time. And negative states tend to suck energy out of other people, right? We're looking for other people and circumstances to help us feel better in the moment. And so we're like a drain on other people's energy. Whereas when you can get into the other state, which is a beautiful state, that state of joy, the state of curiosity, the state of gratitude, you start giving that. Now energy's coming off of you and flowing into other people, and you're having that positive impact on them. And that's really where I think, that saying, if you become the change that you want to see in the world, really comes out of that idea of, if I can just change my energy to and this state of being in a beautiful state and full of joy and love and curiosity and giving, I start impacting the world around me, and then they start impacting the world around them. It's contagious.
It really is. And then even if someone's struggling with feeling like, okay, I don't feel joyful, to your point, but you also don't have to be this negative vacuum that sucks all the air out of the room. You can make a choice to not be that.
Yeah.
So, and I thought I should address, in case anybody's wondering, like 50, oh my gosh, that seems like so much. The point isn't to be that it has to be 50. The idea behind 50 is, when you think in terms of like, wow, expanding to think of lots and lots of ideas, it gets you to expand your thinking beyond what you might normally do, to notice the things you might not normally notice, to push yourself to think in new ways. So that's the idea of behind 50. Not that you have to actually come up with 50, but it somehow opens up your mind to be more creative and open to different possibilities. So that is about.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And it is, when you go through it, it's easy to go through the book, 50 Fun Things. It's a nice little compact book I could carry around in my back pocket. It's a great pick me up anytime. There's a couple of them in here, and I want to bring them out because I read a lot. My the audience, if you've listened to any episodes, you're constantly hearing me talk about books. And I love making connections between different ideas and different books. And one of the books I'm reading, just read this last week. It was a short little book called, what's the name of it? It's called The Joy of Not Thinking, A Radical Approach to Happiness. And a lot of times when we think about not thinking, we think about meditation, mindfulness meditation, which is really hard. I don't, if anybody out there has ever tried not thinking, it's pretty much impossible to stop your thoughts. And the idea of mindfulness isn't so much to stop the thoughts, but it's to just start noticing the thoughts rather than just having them and letting them run wild through your head. You take a step back and you become, instead of the thinker, you become the observer of the thinker of the thoughts is kind of the approach to mindfulness. But in this book, he gives a couple of different ideas that really parallel well to some of your 50 fun things. And his idea to get out of our head, I talked a minute ago about how we're so serious. And a lot of times it's our thinking in our head that becomes very serious, and we make things way more serious than they need to be a lot of times. And his suggestion is kind of going along with a couple of your numbers here. Move in joyful ways, number 15. Number 17 is do a silly dance.
Yeah.
Number 18 is laugh hard. And I think number 29, if I got that right, is play. And that's exactly, all of those things are the exact things he says to do to get out of your head. He said, he talks about, dancing or just moving your body, roll around on the floor and just laugh or make funny noises. Like I'll do it sometimes, even people think I'm strange when I'm going for a walk, but if I'm in a walk and I find myself stuck in my thoughts, I'll try to just act goofy. Like I'll start walking kind of funny and go, and just kind of do these goofy
You're
things.
brave.
Yeah. Well, I love seeing the reactions of people
as
I'm doing that, because they're like, what's wrong with, I did it to my wife the first time. I didn't tell her, she was just getting real serious and I was starting to feel serious, and I just started, and she's looking at me like, oh my gosh, are you having a seizure, Jeff? And I did it. I kept going for, 30 seconds or so. But the shift in my mind, things stopped being serious. I instantly felt better. I mean, heck, just doing it here just now, the seriousness of our conversation kind of took a turn just by being goofy and silly for a second. And when we think about kids, go back and be like a child, number 5. Live in childlike wonder. I mean, it's because they play. They have something serious happen, they process it, and they move on. They'll have their good cry, they'll have their tantrum, and 2 minutes later, they've forgotten it, and they're back to playing again. And we forget so much of that. And boy, if we could just, in the boardroom, maybe you should try that next time at your 50 fun things. Get people up there to move, in joyful ways and be silly. Do that silly dance, laugh hard, play. Because those are the things that really help us see it. And you're not thinking when you're doing it. You're totally lost in that moment of play. And that's why play is so important to us as human beings.
Yeah. And play also connects us too, as part of what helps us bond. I mean, if you think about the people that you laugh with, there's something bonding about that.
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing it back to that connection, because it is a lot more fun when I do that kind of goofiness in front of someone who's not expecting it. And it gives us something to immediately talk about and laugh about. But it's a lot more fun to do that. I think that's why I don't mind doing it out in public, because maybe that'll just rub off. I mean, if they can go away just saying, I just saw the craziest guy in the world, and they're laughing about it, I can check a mission accomplished. I helped improve somebody's day.
Yes. That's one of the things too, is make somebody's day. And like you said, don't take ourselves so seriously. And part of that is worrying about what other people think. And if we can let go of that's really freeing too.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time stuck in our head, worried about what other people think of us.
Yeah, and then are we truly being ourselves if we're adjusting ourselves to other people's expectations? And I know you have to do, you have to do some of that, of course, in your professional life and in your work, but you probably can be more of yourself, and when I say you, I'm not just only talking to you, Jeff, I'm talking about all of us.
Yeah, yeah.
There are ways that we can show up and bring more of our personalities into our lives.
And I think that's critical to bring our personalities, to accept who we are. I'm getting ready to do a photo shoot. My daughter's going to take some pictures of me for me to use in social media and on my website, around this hashtag Lita concept. And one of the things I've kind of struggled with for a few years now has been how I look professionally. I've given it a lot of thought, maybe too much thought, and have been too serious about it. But I've always, at times I want to, wear jeans and, a t-shirt, and, I'm kind of to the point where, and I think about what I'm going to wear in this photo shoot, and I'm going to have maybe 3 or 4 different changes of clothes that I'll change into. I don't think any of them are going to be a suit and a tie. And I'm okay with that. And the suit and tie has always been, it's never been me feeling really comfortable and good about it. It's been me trying to make other people feel comfortable and good, and present this image of professionalism that didn't feel authentic to me. And I've really just kind of embraced this attitude of, I don't care. I'm going to wear these different outfits. We'll see how the pictures look. I may not like them once I see the pictures, but I'm going to do this my way, and people will either accept it or they won't.
Right. And then really you're role modeling too for, your coaching clients, those that you serve, that to step into their authentic best selves as well. And so I think that's great that you're trying it out and you're finding your own boldness. You're, stepping out into the world as more of a thought leader, and thought leaders aren't so concerned with how everybody else looks. They show up as who they are because they're a leader.
Yeah. Being authentic, I think it's huge for our self-esteem. Again, going back to the go-giver, that's the third law of stratospheric success, is be authentic. The greatest gift you have to give is yourself. And I heard a quote, well, not a quote, somebody told me one time, maybe it was a quote, I don't know, but it stuck with me too. Speaking of what other people think of you, it's none of your business what somebody else thinks of you.
You're right. That's a good point. And sometimes we try to interpret what we think somebody thinks of us, and we're so far off base that, like, why even try?
Yeah.
Really, just be you, be your best you, and the right people will show up and be there.
Yep. Yeah. It's amazing how, just like with being open to giving, I mean, all of this seems to just tie in together, doesn't it? But as you really step into your most authentic self, as you become open to giving, as you become more generous yourself, as you start focusing on 50 fun things rather than the 50 things that really bring you down.
Right.
It's amazing to me how much, I was just sitting here prior to our show and I was reflecting. I'm curious, do you have a vision board?
I do. Yeah, I actually, I've made several vision boards. I used to lead vision board workshops, but they work, and sometimes they take time. But
Yeah.
The one that I made, 7-8 years ago, I look at that one all the time, and I see how things are coming to fruition, and things that I don't even remember putting on there. Like, oh, wow, how did I know? Like, somewhere in my subconscious, those images spoke to me, and they're showing up.
Yeah. Some, they don't all show up at once. And
Right.
what I find fascinating too, and I think one of the big reasons to have a vision board, put it up, it's up in my office. I see it, but not see it every time I walk in. It's
Mm-hmm.
there. And so periodically I'll look at it and then I'll be just amazed and that's where the importance comes in, I think, is that sometimes we don't acknowledge our wins. We don't even see, like, I have on my vision board that I wanted to be a coach and I wanted to be a public speaker. I wanted to be in front of audiences talking to them, among other things. Some things have happened and some haven't, but for a while I wasn't recognizing that I am talking in front of audiences, that I am a coach to people, that I am an author of a book. Um, and so I wasn't saying that about myself, but because it was on my vision board, and one day I sat down and just looked over at it, I'm like, oh, I am doing that, and I'm doing that, and I'm doing that. I am an author. I am a coach. I am a speaker. It may not be on this grand, huge scale yet, but I'm there.
Yeah, and I'm happy you brought this up because I have had a few people share with me, and you actually just reminded me of this illustration, that 50 Fun Things has a lot in common with the vision board. It gets people like dreaming, thinking bigger, and I've had many people come back to me and say, a lot of times people will post it on their wall, other times they'll put it in a drawer somewhere, and then a year or so later they'll pick it up and like, oh my gosh, I didn't remember putting that on my chart. And I've done that. I've had at least three, maybe several people have write a book on their 50 Fun Things chart, and that's not a small feat. Like, that's a big thing. And at least 3 or 4 have come around and said, oh my gosh, that was one of my things. And sometimes they don't even remember putting it on there, but they set the intention, they start talking about it, it starts being something they think about more, and then they accomplish it. And or they find something that's even better than what they originally planned. And that's what's been really beautiful, is seeing people dream and voice their dreams and then take action.
Yeah, and we've got to wrap up here. We're kind of running low on time. I want to respect your time. Be fun to catch up maybe down the road, as you've done more and more of these workshops, and just hear some of the stories that you're hearing from folks whose lives you've touched. But I kind of want to close on a couple of things. First is just this idea of how important it is to really shift a focus. And I think where we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, how the 50 Fun Things and what you're doing with Win-Win Connects really leading into and being a part of LIDA, being a part of Love is the Answer, because if love is the foundation and the basis of all of our relationships, all of our connections,
Mm-hmm.
it is utterly amazing to me the positive things that just start showing up out of nowhere in our lives.
Yeah, and just loving your life in general with
Yeah.
all of that.
The little things, enjoying the small things. We so often we're looking for that one big hit, and we miss out on all of these little moments to experience joy. And I think that's one of the great things about your book, is if you're carrying it around and you're, maybe this would be a fun little exercise for, carry it around in your purse, in your back pocket. And when you're having these moments of being too serious or being caught up in it, just randomly open the page and see what it tells you to do, and just stop whatever you're doing and do it.
I love that advice. Yeah, people have been telling me that they're doing it. Some people open it randomly. Some people go one by one. Some people use it for conversations with their friends or their family. Lots of ways. It's for anyone that's wondering, the book is really, really simple read that the intention is to get you dreaming, thinking, reflecting, and then finding a small way you can take action. So it's not a book that you need to sit down for hours and read. It's like Jeff said, it's a little pick me up. You find what you need, and you're good to go for the day, and you use it again later.
Yeah. All right. So as we're wrapping up, Teresa, is there anything that I should have asked you or we should have gone over that we didn't?
There's so much we could talk about, and I would direct people to, if you would like to see some success stories or some things that alumni of 50 Fun Things have shared, if you go to the blog on the 50funthings.com website, there's some really inspiring posts there. So I'd recommend that. And of course, I welcome people to stay connected. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm putting my focus into LinkedIn. So if you use LinkedIn and you connect with me, let me know that you heard me on the hashtag Lita podcast with Jeff, and it would be great to connect with you there.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to put links to your site, to your LinkedIn profile, all in the show notes. So if you want to connect with Teresa, you can. I'll also put links to your book, as well as the other couple of books, Positive Intelligence and the other one that I mentioned, The Joy of Not Thinking. So anybody who wants to check those out will be able to find those. I think that pretty much sums it up. The best way to buy your book would be, is it on Amazon?
My other book is on Amazon, Win-Win Networking. However, 50 Fun Things, because it's such a cute little book, it's too small. It's not the dimensions that Amazon self-publishing uses. So if you go to the 50funthings.com website, there is a store there, and it lists some of the other 50 Fun Things tools there as well.
And the Win-Win Networking book, that was your first book.
Yes.
And it's basically a how-to.
Yep, it walks people through step by step. It's super interactive, like everything I do, for people to identify their networking goals and how to accomplish them. So there are networking tools, tips, checklists, and even a section to document what's working for you and what's not in your networking. So that one is also designed to be quick and easy to get the information you want, to think through how to really strategize your own networking. I personally use it for myself every time I'm making a shift to reevaluate how I'm going about my networking. And so that one's on Amazon, and if I do say so myself, I design things that I need and then I put them out there. And so I will say that it is a useful resource.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for our time today. Again, I'd love to catch up with you sometime down the road, and just really appreciate you coming on and having a chat with me for the last hour or so. And I think we covered a lot of ground and had a lot of fun, and gave a lot of you gave a lot of great advice, and there's so much more advice. I highly recommend Teresa's book, 50 Fun Things, Enjoy the Small Things. Teresa.
Yeah, and also I am adjusting my workshops for teams and groups to be online at this time too. So I'm very excited to get that out into the world. So I'd welcome talking to anybody about that as well. Thank you so much, Jeff. This was really fun.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we'll do it again sometime, and we'll stay connected. And please, for those of you in the audience, connect with Teresa. Check out her book. It's really cool, and it can really have a major impact on your day-to-day life and the lives of the people you love most around you. So thanks again, Teresa.
Thanks, Jeff.
That was a lot of fun for me, and I hope you got a lot of good information out of that. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of great advice. If you have any questions, if you want to link to any of the books we talked about, if you want to link to Teresa, I've got her link to her LinkedIn profile, as well as a link to her website, 50 Fun Things, where you can find out about how to get Teresa to come speak at your organization, some upcoming events that she has, and lots of other cool and neat tools, especially around 50 Fun Things. I think she has a workbook and a journal as well. You can find it all there in the show notes, as well as links to books that we talked about, The Joy of Not Thinking, A Radical Approach to Happiness, her 2 books, and Positive Intelligence, Why Only 20% of Teams and Individuals Achieve Their True Potential. So click on those links and get those and add them to your library. I think you'll really enjoy them. If you enjoyed this conversation, if you didn't enjoy the conversation, if there are things that you heard that you didn't like, things that you agreed with, either way, it doesn't matter. We got to keep this conversation going. The best way to do that is join the movement. Follow us on Twitter. Join our Facebook group, like the Facebook page, go to the website, www.leadaforlife.com. Make sure you subscribe, enter your email address. Each Friday, I send out a weekly newsletter called Take 5 Friday. In that newsletter, I'll introduce next week's guests. I'll tell you any books that I'm reading and what I think of them, introduce to you some quotes that I've been thinking about, and cool people that I've discovered throughout the week. So it's a real great way for us to connect and for you just to get some updated information about what's going on within the #LEADA community, and just another great opportunity to stay involved and be a part of this growing community. So go ahead and head on over to leadaforlife.com and subscribe. That's going to do it for this week. Thanks again for joining me. Don't forget, love is the answer. Now go out there and love one another. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the #LEADA podcast, hosted by Jeff Connor. We hope you are now inspired to say love is the answer. Now go out and change the world.
Tell me you want more for you and me. Give me something to hope